we're going to introduce Laura, and she's going to give us a presentation on the most recent study that was released in 2020. Laura?
Thank you, Jake. It's a real pleasure to be here today, even if it's just virtually. Before I start, I just want to talk a little bit, and I'll share my screen now so we can get that going. Let's see. Oops, jump back one. And yeah, making the business case is so important. I started in accessible travel in 1987, and I was with a group out of New York, and there was no data that was reliable, and people were just making things up. And as a background in economics and in market research, I was so frustrated. And I have to say that when Eric Lipp came around, he opened Open Doors organization in 2000. By 2002, he had funded his first study. And this is not inexpensive, but I was so proud of him. And eventually I jumped ship and joined Eric in 2004. And since then, we've done 3 more studies. So when COVID came along and we had planned to do the study in 2020, we didn't want to stop. We wanted to at least be able to see what the boom period looked like in 2018, 2019. And that way we could benchmark that boom, and we would be able to compare and see when things came back up to that level again, post-COVID. So we went ahead last June, in June and July. We had 1,100 respondents this time, all 18 years and older, and with a variety of disabilities, as we'll talk about. And what we wanted to look at were, again, the general travel behaviors, including frequency of travel, spending, and so on. We looked at the airlines, airports, cruise lines, hotels. This time we also looked at auto travel, because a lot of destinations are not in cities, they're out in the country. And for example, we had done a project the year before with I Love New York, and we were surveying all the attractions around the state, and they want to know, how far will people travel in order to come to visit them? We wanted to look also at the obstacles, because there's still a lot of barriers to travel, and it's something we've focused on all along. How do you remove those barriers? And then, of course, we wanted to see, when are people thinking that they're going to start traveling again? So in terms of who's in the study, the median age was 63, 54% female, 46% male, which is pretty much, across the board in the country. There are more women than men. Long-lasting conditions included physical disabilities at 70%, deafness or hearing loss at 32%, vision loss 22%, and then a learning condition at 21%. So of course that adds to more than 100%, because people do have multiple conditions, especially as they travel. I'm going to try to move my little thing out of the way there. Okay, severity of condition. 43% had a very severe, somewhat severe condition. Moderate condition was 46%, and then slight, but still rising to the level of a disability, was 11%. So that's basically the respondents who participated in the study. In terms of the general travel patterns, adults with disabilities are traveling. We found across all the studies that about 70% of adults with disabilities took at least one trip over a 2-year period. And that's why we do the 2-year period. We don't want to lose those people out of the study who only travel once over 2 years. 4 and 10% had taken 3 or more trips. About a fifth were frequent travelers. And we define that as 6 or more trips over the 2-year period. Most were traveling for pleasure, but 13% took at least one business trip, and 14% took at least one combination trip. Generally, people are not traveling alone. So when you talk about impact, we look just at the spending of the traveler with the disability, but they usually travel with at least one other adult, and often with children as well. And on the last trip, most took a trip overnight and stayed in overnight accommodations. Only 4% had just taken a day trip on their last trip. In terms of impact, here I just want to note that we are basing our projections and our population on the American Community Survey. And this is a very, very conservative estimate of adults with disabilities. It's only 15.4% of the US adult population has a disability in this particular study. The CDC study in 2018 puts this at 26%. The Social Security Administration in 2014 actually put it at 30%. So when you look at these impact numbers and spending, this is very conservative in our study. But because we started with the American Community Survey, we have to stick with it or it throws off our trending totally. So in terms of general travel, we saw spending jump from 34.6 billion in 2015 to 58.7 billion in the current study. And that's again over the 2-year period. So that's 27 million travelers, 81 million trips. By air, we also saw the frequency of travel jump and the spending jump. So it went from 9 billion in 2015 to 11 billion in 2020. In terms of overnight stays, 59% of adults with disabilities had used an overnight accommodation when they traveled. 23 million travelers took 68.7 million hotel-based trips. By cruise, with the figures there went up as well. We look at that over a 5-year period. So 13% of adults with disabilities took a cruise compared to 10% in our previous study in 2015. That's 10.4 billion just on fares, 3.1 billion on excursions. And that actually doubled the spending on excursions. So perhaps that indicates that more of the shore destinations are becoming accessible. It might be easier to get on and off the ships because of more accessible tenders, for example. And then this time we did look at travel by car. And this, of course, is the most popular way for people to travel because you can take everything with you, your assistive devices, your medications, everything you need is right with you. You don't have to worry about transferring into an airline seat, for example. So 3/4 of the people had traveled only by car on at least one of their trips. And 4 in 10 had actually rented a car or van. So this is an important market for rental cars as well. And most people are going to be able to travel some distance by car and be comfortable doing that. Typically, six hours to reach a destination was about the norm, but many feel at ease, driving 5 to 9 hours or even 10+ hours. 31%, almost a third of our people would take a much longer trip by car. So that's really good for destinations that are more remote. And then 1/3 of adults with disabilities had used a rideshare service over the 2-year period as well. Oh, actually, that one's over the past 12 months. Finally, we wanted to look at obstacles. For airlines and airports, it's about 70% of people, reporting a major barrier. For hotels, it was 53%, so about half. And that had increased a little bit from 2015. When we look at the common obstacle categories, physical obstacles make up 44%, personnel, customer service, and communication obstacles each make up about 15%. And this is an indication that we need to do better in terms of our training for our frontline staff, but also that we need to make sure that people get the information that they need in a format that is, accommodates their particular disability. When we look at the physical obstacles, the top 5, 3 of them are pretty easy to remedy or inexpensive to fix. Doors that are heavy or hard to open. Often that's just an adjustment. Lack of built-in or portable shower benches, again, quite easy to remedy. Beds that are too high, again, we can do that without any major expense. And then, of course, some things are more difficult. The lack of availability of convenient rooms and inaccessible shower or bath facilities. That's more of an investment, but at least we've seen those barriers come down over time since 2005. And that's because there's now more new construction. It's very hard to do things when you're renovating, to make things as accessible as when you build it right from the start. So that's sort of a summary of obstacles with regard to the hotels. How do people plan the trip? Planning is so important, and where do you get that access information? It's still, as we look across the board from 2002 to date, it's previous experience, it's friends and families that are still the top sources. And why is this? It's really because people are still not putting their access information up online. And this is obviously a key part of TravelAbility, trying to get people to create that accessible landing page make their website accessible, and put that information up so that people can use it. So we see here that attractions and tour companies, only 18% of people use those for sources of access information. For state or city tourism offices, 16%. So hopefully over time, we'll see these numbers come up. As the information gets out there and people are aware that they can find the information there, then that's going to be great. Those numbers should come up when we do our study again. And of course, we wanted to look at what do people do on vacation. People are people. People with disabilities are people, and it pretty much mirrors what travelers in general do when they travel. So the top 4 activities are eating out at a restaurant at 70%, visiting family, taking part in family events at 52%, local shopping 45%, tourist attractions 43%. And people, a third of our sample, they like to visit museums or art galleries. They also like to go to state and national parks. They like to go to the beach, take part in beach activities. So we need to make those things accessible, obviously. And then people will do outdoor sports, but to a much lesser number. So outdoor recreation activities at about 18%, boats and water sport activities 13%. But still, for those people, that's what they want to do. Let's make sure that they can actually participate in the things they love doing. And then just looking at the future travel plans, of course, now with the Delta variation or variant, things are, very, confusing and difficult again. But what we found was that most travelers with disabilities plan to travel at some point when things lightened. Half were expecting to wait 2 to 11 months, another fifth planned to wait a year longer, but 1 in 10 wanted to travel right away. And I think it's like getting back to work, as Sasha was saying. People want to get out and travel. People fight hard to be independent, and once you've traveled, you want to keep traveling. So that's no surprise. And already the service companies in the airports are telling us that in some cases, they're back up to pre-COVID levels in terms of the demand for wheelchair assistance. So that's really an encouraging sign. And of course, people want to stay in the hotels, resorts. They want to visit outdoor attractions initially, take multi-day trips by car before, getting back on planes, basically. But they also want to visit cultural institutions like museums and aquariums. So yeah, this information, of course, things have changed a lot since we first went in the field. But we do know that people do want to get out and travel again and enjoy what they were enjoying pre-COVID. So just like everybody else. So thank you so much. Please get in touch with us if you have questions. There's a lot more that's in this study, and when we go to do this again, we'd love your support. We'd love some financial support because we are a small group, and we know people love getting the statistics. So we would like to be able to ask more questions and find out even more the next time around. So thank you so much. Thank you, Jake.